record it like a podcast in the recording studio, and I won't have to worry about this ever again. But for people that aren't here, which Kaylin and Noah aren't here, so I have to make sure they have a recording to watch. Anyways, so where am I at? So she says, do your research, pray about it, what God wants you to do. He wants to be your provision, your protection, and your pleasure. He wants to be your healer, not a diet, not a supplement, not a medication. Mm-hmm. So you pray about the course that God wants you to do. So that's what I started doing that night. And that night I ate chicken and squash and spinach. I didn't eat M&Ms or raid the kids' candy, and haven't since then, thankfully. But I did have mozzarella sticks over the weekend. That's okay, because that's my standard whatever on the food truck. But anyways, you have to go after that unbelief, just like we just talked about, Durak. You have to go after it. You can't just let it sit there and you stay stuck in the same spot. I don't want to be stuck wherever I'm at as a 60 folder or whatever. I want to be a 100 folder, and to be a 100 folder, I've been telling God I want off all medication. Well, then he's sitting here trying to help me get off all the medication, and I'm not listening. And so now he's saying, now you don't have a choice. Now you have to rely on me because you don't put your body in this position, you know. But the next day I get the reward and the fruit of seeing that I lost 6 more pounds. So I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to quit. I'm just going to keep going, and I'm going to try harder, and I'm going to fast to deal with this unbelief. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to get through all these notes. You guys are going to have to read them by yourselves because it's already after 8 o'clock. Or I'm not 8 o'clock, 7. I'm sorry. So remember that faith that we were measured, a measure of faith. Wait a minute, where am I at? I wanted to read to you the prayer in Psalm 69 and the prayer in Matthew 6. But if we have time, I'll read it to you. If not, you'll have to read it to yourself. But faith needs prayer for its development and full growth. Prayer needs fasting for the same reason. So we were given a measure of faith, and our faith needs prayer. What's prayer? Talking to God, relating to God, communicating with God. It needs that to develop and grow. Our faith needs that to develop and grow, to remove that unbelief. And then prayer, faith needs prayer, and then prayer needs fasting. Fasting has done wonders when used in combination with prayer and faith. This is a biblical doctrine. To fast means to abstain from food, that which caused the fall of man. Fasting humbles the soul before God, chastens the soul, and crucifies the appetites and denies them as to give the entire time to prayer. It manifests earnestness before God to the exclusion of all else, shows obedience, gives the digestive system a rest, demonstrates the mastery of man over appetites, aids in victory over temptation, helps to attain power over demons, develops faith, crucifies unbelief, and aids in prayer. Fasting does all of that.
Wow.
All of that. So, if you want to deal with something in your soul, the easiest way to do that is to fast. And since we're talking about my digestive system, and it says it gives the digestive system a rest, which this came directly out of the Dake's Bible. It was in the study notes. So, we know this because we've learned it in reading the Maker's Diet with people that have done the nutrition class. We've learned it in reading the Maker's Diet. Pastor Lori's told us about it. And the other book, the Annette Reader book, talks about fasting and what it does for your digestive tract. But 24 hours without food, it literally resets your body. It resets inflammation. It resets everything in your body. So the medication that I take is an anti-inflammatory. So what is going to be my best thing to aid me in inflammation is to be continually fasting at least 24 hours every week, if not more, when I first go off the medicine. So fasting literally helps your body heal itself because you're giving it a reset. 24 hours will give it a reset. All believers are supposed to fast. All believers are supposed to fast. But no regulations or set rules are to given as to how long, how often, or what. This is determined by your individual needs and desires. You should fast when you're under chastening, under judgment, in need, in danger, when worried, in trouble, in spiritual conflict, and when desperate in prayer. Well, I'm desperate. Things have gotten desperate.
So just never eat again and everything will be fine.
Samuel, you always take it to the extreme.
Again.
Now, the next set of notes is all about prayer, and this came, a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it came from a Dutch Sheets book. I don't know which one, but he wrote a couple of books on prayer. One was on intercessory prayer, one was on authority and prayer, I don't know. But I thought it was really important because with understanding authority, power is the strength or force needed to rule. Authority is the right to do so. They are governmental twins and must operate in tandem. Authority without the power to enforce is meaningless. Power exercised without authority, the right to use that power, is usurpation and is wrong. So what he's saying is, like, someone can show up, especially like it's Halloween time, so think about this now. Somebody can show up dressed up like a police officer. They could even have a gun and handcuffs. But do they have the authority? No, they're just dressed up like that. We have the authority because we've been saved and he put it in our spirit. So we have the authority. When you're talking about authority, which I'm just going to skim through these notes, I'm not going to read them all. You guys can read them to get the full effect. But we have the authority because we have the author. In the word authority is author. So we have him, so that's why we have the authority. Satan, thinks he has power, but he's just dressed up. He don't have no power. Antichrist. He don't have no power. He don't have the authority. I shouldn't say he don't have power. He has power, but he don't have the authority. Therefore, since Jesus dealt with Satan's authority, the right to use his power or abilities, then we need to deal with him as a usurper, a rebel, a thief that has no right to steal, kill, and destroy. But he will if we don't stop him. And because of our unbelief, we don't. So we need to fast to deal with the unbelief, so we will stop him. Jesus said we have the authority, keys to bind forces in hell. Matthew 16:19, the term for bind in this verse means to fasten or ties with a chain or cord. It also means legally or contractually binding. We can pray with authority, binding or tying Satan legally, and God will back us with his power. One as authority over the one that authors. The creator determines the purpose of his creation and holds all rights to it. So that's where we get that authority. Then the two prayers are Psalm 69 and Matthew 6:9-21, which is
Live, love, love.
No, it's not live and love and love. It's our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And then I took notes from online and put them in here about the Our Father which art in heaven, about what each couple of sentences means and different things that different people have said about what it means. And I included that. I'm not going to go through all of it, but there's some really interesting stuff in there. Like one that I'm going to bring up. Let me see if I can find where I wrote on here. Hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. One of the notes that I found was that in this prayer, he taught us and used it on himself in the most unrestricted sense. When the bloody sweat stood on his face and all the fear and trembling of a man in anguish were upon him, so in the garden, when all that was upon Jesus, remember we talked about that's where he dealt with his soul? He didn't dispute the decree of the Father, but bowed his head and cried, nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. So in the garden, Jesus said, your will be done. So that's what he's telling us to pray. When he gave us the way to pray, that's when he gave us this prayer. When he was saying, this is how I want you guys to pray. He wants us to pray, his will be done. He wants our soul to be subject to our spirit. He wants our soul to be free from strongholds so that we can let God's will be done. The other thing I wanted to point out was after the prayer, right away he starts talking about fasting. Because he says in verse 14 about forgiving other people or he won't forgive you. We talked about that in the forgiveness week. But then verse 16, he says, when you fast, be not as the hypocrites with a sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces, that they may appear unto men that they fast. So in other words, when I fast, I can't come in here and be like, oh, I'm so hungry because I'm fasting. You know what I'm saying? So he's saying he tells them how to pray, then immediately after that he tells them how to fast. And in the notes about that, when you fast, Jesus spoke these fundamental practices of spiritual life in his kingdom: giving, praying, and now fasting. Clearly, Jesus assumed that his followers would fast. In the Old Testament, they commanded fasting on the Day of Atonement. During the exile, the Jewish people expanded the practice of fasting. When you fast, do not be like the hypocrites. The hypocritical scribes and Pharisees wanted to make sure that everyone knew they were fasting, so they would have a sad countenance and disfigure their faces, so the agony of fasting would be evident to all. When you fast, anoint your head, wash your face, so that no one knows that you're fasting. And Jesus instructed us to take care of ourselves as usual and make the fast something of a secret before God. Yes, sir.
Then why are you telling us you about to fast?
Because I'm teaching about fasting. I'm not telling you I'm fasting right now, which I'm not, but I'm not like, oh, I'm fasting right now. I'm telling you, I'm teaching you about fasting, so I'm using examples of when I fasted in the past.
You shouldn't tell us. You really shouldn't.
Son.
Just saying.
It was definitely
And then it talks about treasures on this earth and all that, and then that's the end of that. So you guys should really, really, really go through and read those notes because they're really, really interesting, but I'm not going to hold you up no more because it's 7:20.
Okay. John 15, this.
So
This
homework
and
is
becoming.
read chapter 13 in the book, read the John 15 insert, and read the Hinds Feet on High Places insert.
A lot of reading, but I do that.